Opa! Welcome to a very special Valentine's Day baguette stream. We're going to make baguettes in probably an hour 15. I needed to go find my razor blade. Since I don't have a lame, a proper holder for this, I'll just be doing it by hand. If you don't, this is just for scoring those beautiful diagonal cuts in the baguette before you bake it. If you do not have one, a very sharp paring knife, Gucci Garden Snake, welcome. If you don't have a super duper crazy sharp, very fine, very thin blade, not to worry. A normal paring knife will work. We just can't make as pretty a design in the dough before we bake it. Make sure I put my blade somewhere safe so I don't stab myself with it. As usual, today's stream is brought to you by a couple of letters and a number. Ghost, we are making baguettes. Yes, the famous French baguette. Very simple recipe. Believe it or not, there's, 6 ingredients. Flour, water, salt, yeast, sugar, and about 24 hours to do it traditionally, minimum 14. I have found a few promising recipes where you can do it start to finish in about 5 hours. Now, most of that time is just sitting around doing nothing, letting the dough rest and proof, technically ferment, but ain't no one got time for that. But I will be experimenting probably because I've got the baguette bug. I've been bitten by it, apparently not inoculated. So I will very likely be making baguettes regularly, trying different recipes that I scour from the internet, and I will see if there's a better, faster, easier way than what you're going to see today. Without further ado, let's dive right into the recipe. I'm just going to do a half batch of this. You'll see why soon. Now, the recipes as listed on the website are in grams. The cup conversions are listed in the notes in the bottom part of the recipes. This recipe itself has a lot of notes. There's, I think, 8 paragraphs. Well, 8 comments. But this is probably one of the longer documented recipes in the entire website over at thedailybear.ca. You should all be there. You should all have it bookmarked and be a member of the old Discord community. For anyone that's super duper observant, you will recognize that by weight, we are using 80% water, 80% hydration. So for every 100 grams of flour, we're using 80 grams of water, which is like 70 to 80 is normal for most breads. A lot of the baguette recipes call for using something closer to 65 to 70% hydration and then adding the yeast later. And in between that, you have what's called a shaggy dough. So you have like stringy dough and it's not fully hydrated. It's not super smooth. And then you use super wet hands to finish kneading it. But in there, you let it rest for half an hour, 15 minutes, 2 hours, depending who you talk to. There's a lot of similar recipes that have been passed down through generations, through different bakeries, and they all have their own claim to fame, and they have their own history, and they have their own, in theory, gastroscience behind the reasons why. So all roads basically lead to Rome. The finished product, depending on how you knead it, how well you knead it, the hydration, the amount of time you let the dough proof, if you proof it in the refrigerator, which slows everything right the heck down so you can develop more flavor in the dough. So you have something closer to a sourdough flavor. The more humid, the more steamy your oven is, the 3 or 4 different resting times and the humidity and how much you've worked the dough factor into how springy the dough is, how bubbly the dough is, how crunchy the exterior is, how thick the crust is, a whole bunch of factors. So because there's a lot of factors and there's a lot of differences in preference, remember we're talking preference, not objectively good or bad finished product. Some people like crispier, crustier baguettes. Some people like a baguette with a really, really thin crust, and they just want that flavor. And they want like a squishy dough with an exterior that's like a super thin cracker, and that's about it. Is it right or wrong? That's preference. Pineapple on pizza, that's objectively good. That's not a preference. There is no wrong when it comes to pineapple on pizza, despite what others might claim. I'm actually not. I'm not cooked. So yes, there's a lot of different ways of making baguettes, and that's why you'll see a lot of different recipes, and they all have slightly different end results. Yes, I am. Okay, so we're starting off with 250 grams of all-purpose flour, and that is approximately 1.5 cups. Now, at some point today, I'm going to TV Magic. If all y'all are old enough to remember what TVs are, I'm going to TV Magic the batch that I started yesterday. It's hanging out in the refrigerator. Being a Greek Canadian, I'm contractually obligated to support Hawaiian pizzas because it's a Greek Canadian invention. Even if I didn't like it, which I love, I'd be required culturally to endorse it. The so-called Hawaiian pizza was invented in Northwest Ontario by a Greek restaurateur who had recently been to Hawaii and wanted to make something exotic. Let's get some more lights on here. Uh-oh, there we go. Let there be a little more light. Awesome. So I need 80% of that by weight of water. There's a lot of notes in here. Grade approximately 1 3/4 cups. Ugh. What's half of 1 3/4? Well, let's just start from the beginning. It's half plus 3/8. So 7/8. That wasn't so hard. The water should be a little warmer than bath water. We're looking at about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 Celsius. In theory, we're using instant yeast, not active yeast, instant yeast. And I believe this stuff that I have here is instant yeast. If you're using active yeast, and it'll say so on the packaging, instant yeast is active yeast, but the granules, the little grains, are a lot smaller, and you don't need to proof it. You don't need to activate it in warm water with sugar in advance. You can just throw it into your dough mixture and let nature take its course. So we're looking for approximately half a teaspoon. Yesterday, I weighed everything to the 10th of a gram. Today, I'm going to go back to my old methods of eyeballing things because you're not going to see this finished product. So just pretend I'm weighing all of these on a scale because what I'm going to pull out of the refrigerator was weighed on a scale. Half a tablespoon, so that's 1.5 teaspoons. Oh, when it comes to sugar, some recipes call for honey. The purists will freak out about either, but especially the honey will brown your baguettes a touch faster. So when you make breads with honey, you are encouraged normally to reduce the temperature by 15 to 25 Fahrenheit. Otherwise, the exterior might brown a little too quickly. I believe that has a lot more to do with the Maillard reaction and there being more dryness. The honey itself is also more acidic. So I think that makes the exterior a little dry. It ends up being a little drier because it's softer. I think that's how the science on that works. Either way, I'm ignoring it. I'm just using sugar. The normal substitution for replacing honey with sugar is 2 sugar for 1 part honey. That's all in the description. I'm going to mix all this in a bowl. Now this dough will seem like it's a little, probably seem like it's a little dry, even though this is at 80% hydration. There should be enough moisture in here to form a proper dough. And as soon as I get my hands in here and start squishing this dough, it should come together a heck of a lot better than it is right now. I want to show you what a shaggy dough looks like though. And this is roughly what it looks like. This is what's called a shaggy dough, as opposed to shaggy do. No, wait, that's the human. Maybe I am cooked. When you have a dough like this, you can take super duper wet hands, and this is apparently what's most common from the traditional recipes. You take your super duper wet hand and just start squishing this all together. But all these strands, this is what makes it a shaggy dough. It means that there's still a fair bit of moisture, but it's surrounded by flour and dry stuff that hasn't been incorporated yet. So you really need to get in there and squish this dough around to expose the moisture bits and pick everything up. Now, as usual, I want to be cleaning the side of my bowl, either with the dough itself, or I bust out my flexible bench scraper. What I'm doing here is just scraping down. Can you hear that? That's slightly stuck dough. Dough that is slightly stuck to the edges of the bowl. Eventually that will become hard, dry, and crunchy, and then we do not want to try to incorporate that back into the dough ball because it probably won't hydrate enough to stop being crunchy. And most people, I don't know about you, but I'm included in this group, I do not like biting into my bread to find a crunchy bit in the middle. Crust is fine. Crunch on the inside of the dough, inside of the bread, not so much. Not so much. Okay. Here we have the makings and the beginnings of a fairly good dough, actually. As always, your local humidity, the age of your flour, the way it was stored, the humidity of your flour, the humidity of your cooking, baking environment, your prep area, heck, even your altitude, the mineral content of your water will all affect how much moisture, how much liquid you need in your dough. Try to be consistent with your supplies. Use the same brand of flour. And if you have to make adjustments, make sure you knead the dough pretty darn well. And the adjustments, if you have to make any, very small. If it's too wet and you have to add flour, you know, in general, I don't. Unless this is like a soup. I almost never add flour to speed up the dough formation process, because I could just keep kneading this. And the longer you spend kneading, some of the moisture will evaporate, and you also get to develop more gluten. And that's the magic stuff that makes bread kind of magical. This is actually a touch wetter than... No, it's about the same as yesterday's. Okay, like I could add a sprinkle of flour to this, work it in. It would probably end up being about a tablespoon of flour, and that's just from experience. If I had to add more water, I would only add 1-2 tablespoons tops, because it goes a heck of a long way. And it can go from feeling like a dry brick of, well, dough, to being closer to soupy with an extra teaspoon. Too much. So add a little bit, spend a good at least 1 minute, preferably 2 or more, kneading it. Make sure the water is fully absorbed before you add more. The last thing you want to do is go, oh, it's too dry, throw in a cup of water. Oh no, it's too wet, throw in a cup of flour. Oh no, it's too dry. And then all of a sudden you have nothing but flour and water. And then it's still not kneaded properly. Okay, so this is all mixed together. We're not worried about forming this into a pillowy, soft ball of dough, although it kind of is. This is still a little sticky, that's fine. What I'm going to do is cover this for a change. I'm not going to spray this with oil, and I'm not going to cover it with cling wrap. I'm just going to use I guess I'm not going to use this one because there's a giant hole in it. A tea towel. I'm just going to leave this alone for 15 minutes. And then I will show you what the first of a few techniques that are required for making baguettes. Now, one recipe that I did come across that I thought was really interesting was you make a shaggy dough with just the flour and water, and you'll cover that and let it sit for half an hour. And then after that half hour, you take your yeast and a little more water and, debatable on, some sugar, activate the yeast, sprinkle some salt. Oh, sorry, you sprinkle some salt across the top of your dough while you're letting it rest. And hopefully that salt absorbs into the dough and helps hold on to some water or some of the moisture. Then you mix in the yeast. You mix everything together, and that part gets kind of squelchy and gross and takes a while to work in, because once the dough starts to become hydrated, it's hard to add. And when it's shaggy, it takes a fair bit of elbow grease to incorporate more liquid into it, because you end up having these like globby sections that are really wet on the outside but still kind of dry on the inside. So you really have to work to squeeze those little globular sections apart. What's the best analogy? Think grapes. You have a bowl full of peeled grapes and you're trying to squeeze them, but you have to like crush each of the little grapes to expose the stuff inside. It's kind of a bad analogy, but hopefully that gets the message, you get the point across. That's the sentiment. So the more commercial versions, you just throw all your ingredients into your mixing bowl, you mix it up, you don't overmix it, you let it rest, and then depending on how long your proofing is, that's the resting time where you let the yeast do its thing and the if you have enough liquid, the autolyzing magic happen, and that's where you have enough liquid, where you have enough hydration, that the dough itself forms its own gluten. So you don't need the elbow grease. Although if you have a machine, why are you not just using the machine to keep kneading the dough? I think that has to do with how tough your finished product is. Because bread isn't just flour and then the protein all becomes gluten. There's a little more to it than that. And I'm not sure that it's been as scienced as you'd expect. There's still a lot of chemistry in cooking that's I haven't found any documentation for. Things like toum, I don't want to get too crazy with the jargon here. An emulsifier is a substance that lets you mix oil and water. It usually has a two-sided molecule. One side likes water, the other side likes oil. And if the droplets of water are small enough, it will stick to both. And that's how you make mayonnaise. Eggs have a good emulsifier in the form of lecithin. That's why you need eggs for making mayonnaise in general, unless you get the isolated lecithin from your local chemist. Garlic has an amazing emulsifying property that I couldn't find any documentation for, but there's this Lebanese garlic mayo that's just garlic and oil. It's the bomb. I love that stuff. Toum, I have a recipe for it. It's super easy to make too. It's way, way, way more forgiving than making mayo with eggs and oil. Yeah, I wish there was more documentation for it. If I had access to a lab like there is one across the street, I'd be all over it. Okay, so we're going to pretend that this has been sitting for a while, and here is the super duper fancy technique. I hope you're ready. You know what? I'm going to do this on my countertop. What we're going to do is grab a handful, pull it away, and fold it back. Turn 90 degrees. Grab a handful, pull it away, fold it back. Turn it 90 degrees. We're going to grab a handful and fold it back. Turn it 90 degrees. We're going to grab a handful, pull it as far as it goes, which is just as far as I pulled the other ones. Fold it back, pat it down, and then we're going to form a cute little ball. We're going to put this back in the bowl, let it sit for half an hour, and do that whole thing 3 times. That helps the formation of the gluten that provides structure a surprising amount. Gluten is the stuff that traps the bubbles from the yeast, and the yeast, as a living organism, converts the carbs, especially the sugar, into beautiful bread bubbles, also known as yeast farts. So it releases CO2, and those bubbles of CO2 get captured inside of the gluten. Gluten has that elastic structure, and it captures the bubbles. Without gluten, your bread would not have bubbles, and it would not be springy, and it would not rise as you let it proof, which is just resting, or when you start baking it. There are other leaveners like baking soda with an acid, baking powder because it has its own acid built in. Eggs do work. And then there's obscure things that will act as a leavening agent. We do this a total of 3 times over an hour and a half, and then we cover the bowl with cling wrap and place in the fridge for 12 hours. since I'm going to be working this later, I'm just going to give this a quick spritz of oil. And I am going to cover this with cling wrap. And I really don't like this dispenser because I almost cut myself on it last time. It's so sharp. Caution, cutting edge is sharp, really. I know that the oil and the cling wrap is kind of overkill. Too bad. Now, this going into the fridge for 12 hours, being refrigerated slows down the activation of the yeast. So it's going to take a heck of a lot longer for the yeast to eat the sugar and fart out those beautiful CO2 bubbles. There's a typo in the notes that I have to fix later. You can do this the same day by just letting this rest in a slightly warm place, like your oven with just the light on. Oven with the light on and making bread, they go hand in hand. They really do. You don't have to worry about having, super low temperature control on your oven. Just leave the temperature off, turn the light on, and leave it alone. Unless it's an LED bulb, which I don't know if those are very common for interior bulbs. It's a good question. I don't know if they're even allowed to sell those anymore. Anywho, refrigerator for this because I'm not going to touch this till tomorrow. After a full minimum 12 hours in the refrigerator, oh my God, TV magic. I mean, snap, look, TV magic. I'm not going to preheat that just yet. So this has doubled in size from the original. And you can see there's some sections in here, I'm going to zoom right in, that have larger bubbles. And the exterior has dried a little more than I wanted. I had this covered with a tea towel. I should have covered it with plastic. So when I realized the error of my ways that I didn't cover this with plastic, I sprayed some oil on top, hopefully to re-moisturize it. I should have brushed some water on top, but it was like 6 in the morning and I was feeling lazy. There's a little bit of a drier crust. I'm going to work this into the dough, no problems. But if you see larger bubbles, you want to get rid of them. This is pretty tough. It's pretty tough. It's slow to spring back, which is what we want. We don't want it to bounce back right away. We want this to be slower, especially after we form them. That's the speed of spring that we want. So I'm going to divide this into 3 even pieces. First things first, I'm just gonna work this crusty bit back in. I mean, if I was worried about presenting this, I would just cut the top. I would just peel the top right off and not use it at all. But I know there's enough moisture in here to rehydrate it. Like you can see, I'll see if you can. It's still a little sticky. This is still very, very wet. Okay. Ugh. I am going to get some flour though from my surface. And we should, whenever I say I should, I usually don't. I should be weighing the dough. So I'm just going to flour the top here, flour my work surface. Okay. Get over here. The total interactive time for making bread in general, something like half an hour. You still need to be around the kitchen. You still need to be paying attention to your timers. But actual time in the kitchen touching things, half an hour. Is it more cost effective to just go to your grocery store bakery section and buy some bread? Probably. Is it, once you have a little bit of experience, your local mass-produced baker will not make bread as good as you can make at home. And shock if you just happen to enjoy doing this by some miracle. If you enjoy tasting the fruits of your labor, then cost really doesn't become a factor and you take pride in what you're doing. And you might even enjoy it more. It's also a fantastic activity you can do with other people. Okay, so I want to divide this into 3 even pieces. Now, this should be done on a scale. Like I said, normally when I say should, I generally don't. Today is one of the exceptions. Mark it on your calendar. Now let's see if my scale goes up this high. Going to zero it out. Zeroed, I have 884.6 grams. So 280 grams is what we want. 281.6, whatever. Oh, I need a heavier knife. Just making sure the third leftover section of dough is about the right weight. And here we go. You stay there. You stay there, and you get over here. Now, from here, there's a lot of different versions of what variants of what to do. One is I just want to pull this out and make a rectangle and do some folding. One other version is I want to stretch this, fold it into thirds, turn it, stretch, fold this back, fold this over, and then using 2 hands, form this into a ball and let this rest. And apparently those 2 sets of folds makes this a lot more stable later on. Do I believe it? Kind of. Because any extra work on your dough makes for a It creates more gluten, creates more structure. That's just the way it is. So it's actually a little more damp than I'd like. When you press down and roll, or take your two hands, squeeze and press together while you're pressing down and at the same time cupping from underneath, you're squishing the dough. You're pinching the dough into the bottom, and then you get a nice smooth bottom like this. And then if you press down and roll, it smooths right the heck out. Gets rid of the seam. I'm not convinced that this is necessary, but I'm doing it just because on a couple of these. This needs just a touch more work. I can probably just pinch these together. I want these creases to be completely gone because I don't want these creases to show up anywhere in the loaf. So that'll be a natural separation that I don't want. I'm rethinking the wisdom of not just peeling the top dried skin off, but here we are. Okay. If it seems too dry in some spots, you know, Tharina, you're going to get me in trouble. Yeah, I don't think the French have reclaimed that word yet. That was a really weird sound. Okay, I'm going to make sure my hands are super duper dry. I'm going to finish forming this, and then I'm going to show you the fun, and then we'll heat up the oven. The actual baking time is like half an hour. So I'm pressing down, rolling, and then I'm just gently squeezing from both sides. The bottom should be nice and smooth. Perfect. See, there isn't a fold there. There's a little bit of a gap, but that's fine. My hands are... This ball is a little wet. Okay, so from here, I want to just pull this into something like a rectangular shape. When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. Okay, so we have something that's close to rectangular-ish. Are you ready? Here's where it starts to get tricky. Here's where we have super fancy techniques. I hope you're seated for this. Using both hands, take the top at most quarter and fold this back about an inch. Whoa, that's some fancy technique. And then you want to just gently press down with your fingertips to seal this seam into the dough. Whoa. We're going to take the top quarter-ish and roll it back down. Whoa. Is everyone at home freaking out about this? Is this technique seemingly impossible? Do I look like some sort of a hand magician? Again, I'll try it again. Look, nothing up my sleeves. I'm just going to fold this back about an inch and just press down. If you see any large bubbles, feel free to pop them. Okay, so after 4 or 5 times, I have the final seal here and the final seam. I'm just going to gently press this down. You can even just use 2 fingers to pinch this together. Now the seam itself, because I have a little seam here, is going to be in a roughly straight line. You can see that, right? It's roughly a straight line. Close enough. That goes face down. Okay, I need to take a minute here because that was some seriously intense technique. I need a drink. I don't know if I can handle this. Wow. Right? Oh, the rectangles, in theory, I let them rest for 45 minutes. I'm taking a few shortcuts here. Follow all the steps on the blog, and away we go. Because I'm trying to keep this to about an hour and a half tops. So from here, I want to roll this out to be the length of my baguettes, which are actually these. I know it's a gadget. It's a perforated, you can see through it, perforated silicone mat. That smelled like, it had a very earthy smell. So my initial thought was to rinse it in vinegar and then wash it with water and then make a paste with baking soda and let it sit and then scrub it off. And then I read the instructions, which were to boil it, which I did. Boiling did nothing. It's rated for 500 Celsius. So like infinity Fahrenheit. Like 900, give or take, Fahrenheit. So call it infinity. So I put it in my oven at 500 Fahrenheit on a baking sheet, 500, and as soon as it came to temperature, I had the fans on, smoke everywhere. Fire alarm went off. I busted out the fire extinguisher just in case. Opened all the windows and doors. I'm being very literal. I'm not exaggerating at all about that. There was a lot of smoke. And once these smoke alarms stopped yelling at me, and once the smoke cleared, I let it bake for another 20 minutes, and the smell was completely gone. Next time I'm getting a metal pan. Okay, so from here, using our hands, once again, we're just going to gently roll. And we're going to pull gently. You can also do this with your fingers, right? Like you could just pull this. You can roll and just pull this apart, and we are going to start forming our baguette. I find just rolling it with 2 hands is a lot easier. So we have our log, we're rolling it, and we're slowly pulling it to the side. We eventually want a tube that starts off pinched, that gets thicker, and then pinches off towards the end. I'm sure you can all figure out a natural shape to compare this to. Everyone does it, usually once a day. But you roll this out to the length that you want. And we want to roll this out to the desired length. So I need to get a few more inches on here. Yes, that's what she said. You guys are going to get me demonetized again. My work surface is a little dry and floury. I'm going to just take this off a little bit. what I wouldn't do for a stainless steel counter or a Klondike bar for that matter. You want to be gentle with this too. Any of the air bubbles that have formed, you want to keep them. At some point, you need to stop beating up on the dough and be a little gentle and respectful of the dough. Besides, if you force it to stretch out, it'll just spring back. Okay, that's about the right length. Now, there's a thing called a baker's couche. No, it's not a couch, it's a couche. It means a fold. It's couche. Which is just a fancy word for a lid-free towel or cloth that's designed for exactly this. So all I'm going to do here once you've pulled up one section, I'm going to bolster this like a body pillow. Because the dough right now is still squishy, and if I left it alone to proof, it would very likely spread out. I want to keep this shape, right? So I'm going to do that by having my towel and the pleat and then the next baguette, holding that side, and then the third baguette, and then another towel on the other. So in the meantime, I'm going to very quickly roll these out. I'm going to rectangulify both of these so we can pretend that I did this a while ago. Again, all roads lead to Rome. Just a little bit of flour on each side to make it a little easier to work with. You can tell I'm not a baker because I'm wearing black, not white. Black is the stupidest color to wear when you're playing with flour for hours on end. Okay, that one's good. That is correct that I'm an idiot, yes. I will be the first to admit it. Anyone that points it out after that is just stating the obvious. Sometimes it needs to be said. And, you know, sometimes it's even more deserved than normal. Okay. So again, I'm going to pour myself a drink. Shoal Lake's finest. Well, right now I'm in no condition to drive that far. Okay, again, I'm going to take the top quarter or so and roll it back. Oh my God. I'm just going to press down on the seam here because right now we have a big seam. I'm just going to press down gently but firmly with all my fingers until that seam is gone, like magic. See? Like magic. And if I see any large bubbles, I'm going to get rid of them. This should only take 4, maybe 5 folding overs. And when we get to the last one, and we have this final seam, we can just pinch this all together. And this final seam goes face down onto the work surface. And then we're good. See where that final seam is? That should have been a plastic surgeon. Fly there. I'm not going to fly with my gear. I guess I don't really need my gear. I would save probably $1,000 in airfare if I flew from Grand Forks instead of from Winnipeg International Airport. I lost track of where the seam was. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Right about now, I'm going to preheat my oven to 400 or 500. And I'm going to make sure I have nothing in here. Very good. I'm going to turn my light on just so I can see in there from now on. You know, after being off Twitch for almost a month, I'd feel really guilty about taking any more time to myself this year without doing remote streams. So at the very least, I'd have to bring 2 cameras, extra cell phone. A couple of lights. You know, basically 1 carry-on would be all I really need. My studio's my streaming setup is pretty minimal. I just couldn't bring my DJ stuff. Okay, so good enough. You know what? I want to try something. Nuvo hates it when I say that. Yeah, I'm getting too old to be lugging gear around though. Okay, so here's my couche, my folded dealio. Just gonna fix this up. I'm going to cover both cylinders with flour and place on a baker's couche. Let it proof till the dough springs back very slowly, approximately 30 to 60 minutes. In my notes, I make the assertion, I don't even assume, I just state, you don't have a couche. I know one of you will. In general, we're going to round it down to 0 of everyone has a couche. Now, while everything is preheating, I'm going to bring up some interesting options. Normally, these beautiful baguettes are cooked in an oven on some sort of a stone. We can simulate that by using a pizza steel or a pizza stone and preheating it for like an hour. If you're really good, if you're really skilled at making pizzas with a stone or a steel, what you can do is use a baker, like a pizza shovel. It's one of those long wooden spatula things for pizzas. and feed your baguettes from the shovel straight onto the pizza stone. I don't have a pizza shovel. Now, what you can do is take your baking sheet, flip it upside down, put your parchment paper on this, and use that to transfer your baguettes to your pizza stone. But you will be cooking your baguettes on a parchment paper on the pizza stone. You can hang on for just 1 minute. I'll be Cradish. Yes, it has holes in it. So this is, yes, it's a gadget. No, I don't need to use this. Once the baguettes are proofed in this shape, they're not going to change a whole heck of a lot. Yeah, you're right. It's actually fiberglass, and then it's sprayed with silicone. I had to drown it in vinegar, scorch it with baking soda, boil it in holy water, and then I eventually threw it in the oven at 500 until all the stank was cooked away. It's been exorcised and baptized by fire. Fahrenheit. I grew up with Fahrenheit on my ovens. My oven over here is in Fahrenheit. We measure the outside weather in Celsius. We measure boiling water at 100 Celsius. Everything else is Fahrenheit. Oh, it gets better. I'm not 188 centimeters tall. I'm 6'2". When I was 220 pounds, I wasn't 100 kilos. I was 220 pounds. We weigh everything else in metric. But like people, ovens, depending if you're a little old, like people that are a little older than I am, they measure the temperature, the ambient temperature in Fahrenheit. I'm used to Celsius. I don't think it's because we're bilingual. I think it's because Canada started going officially metric in like, I want to say 78, something like that, but it didn't really take effect till 84-ish, and by then I was already a teenager, so whatever. 60. Okay, so if you have a pizza stone, you either put the baguettes that are already formed straight onto the stone, which I don't recommend unless you have a lot of experience making pizzas. You can slide it on a parchment paper with a parchment paper onto the stone. I'm really good with that. This is a lot easier, and we're going to see if this lives up to the hype, because I've never used one of these before. Oh yeah. So this bad boy, I'm just going to form two tubes out of this. and just let it rest in the mold. In the meantime, I'm preheating my oven to 500 Fahrenheit. And what I'm going to do then, I'm going to fill this with boiling hot water and put that on the bottom shelf. I'm going to soak this in some boiling hot water and put this beside the baguette tray in the oven, because this is going to help create a steady supply of steam. This, in theory, is going to help regulate how much steam keeps going in the oven. If you don't have these things, or you don't want to use those things, what you can do is, if you have like an inverted, think of like a roasting pan, but like a disposable aluminum one. Don't dispose of it, because you can use them forever. Close enough. Flip that over on top of your baguettes and bake your baguettes with a big metal cover. But before you cover it, spritz them with some water, so you have a lot of moisture in that sealed area for your baguettes. Yes, I'm going to have a metal bowl of boiling hot water in the oven while it's baking. The oven is going to be over 212 Fahrenheit. Actually, both. Over 212 Fahrenheit, so it's going to be steaming. And I'm going to have a steady stream. I'm going to have a steady supply of steam in the oven. The whole baking time is less than 30 minutes, so the pan won't run out of water. And I want to preheat my oven to 500 because I'm going to do my baking at 475. I don't want the oven to cool down below 475 at the start of the baking process. So I want to be above the target, because when I open the door, load the stuff, it's not going to be at the right temperature to start with. I still want the ambient temperature to be around 475. The hottest I've ever been in this temper in Fahrenheit was 150 on the dot, or 151? It was no, that's not right. So it was a 122. That's 50 Celsius. I think that's the right temperature. Let me double check that. Yeah, it was 122 Fahrenheit on the bulb. That was during a crazy heat wave in Greece in '87. I've heard that it gets about that hot in some places. I was young and in fantastic shape at the time, but hundreds of like local residents were dropping from the heat. It was not good. And that was right after a blizzard. And then within a couple of months, I was back to 40 below weather in Winnipeg. Again, I was young and fairly indestructible back then, so I was pretty immune to all those crazy temperature extremes. Like, a lot of people can't appreciate how stupid the weather here is. Like, since the middle of December, it's gone from 40 below to above freezing 4 times. So somebody with a whole lot of arthritis in their system, I was young and in heat, pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah, so I have a lot of arthritis all over the place. And these crazy changes are not good for me. And that's why I was off Twitch for 3 weeks. Because the arthritis and not being able to function was pretty damn bad. Okay, so that's the whole thing about the pizza stone and or just a baking stone in general, but it's usually used for pizzas. Thank you, Crash, and thank you for the message. That was really sweet. Do I want to cut this in half or... or not? Pinch it off? Yeah, I'll pinch it off. You know, if you have the right amount of fiber, your hands, no. I've got stories. If you have the right amount of fiber, okay, I don't want to get gross, but how often do you guys get perfect poops? I mean, poops that just leave your body with no effort. And of course you wipe when you're done, but you realize you didn't have to. I still get those regularly. I'm very happy. I know my diet is doing something right. I'm doing something right with my diet. Is that a side effect of, I guess he gets a lot of fiber. Yeah, I'm good for several times a week for sure. I've said this for the last 2 years, and one of these days I will actually make it happen. I want to try carnivore just for 2 months, just to see how I feel on it. I suspect I'll feel great. I also want to do, I hate the word cleanse because it's not, there's so many weird connotations to it. I've gone vegetarian and secretly vegan before for a few weeks at a time. For me, I don't think it's sustainable, but I feel freaking fantastic for at least the first 2 to 3 weeks. And whenever I feel like crap and I'm totally run down, I know that going back to a super, super simple diet of just veg and some fruit, I know I feel great, but after a few weeks, I stop feeling great. So I don't know if there's a magic threshold that I have to work through, or I'm just used to having all that extra creatine and vitamin B. My poops are always good. It was the early 2000s. This was shortly after Johnny Knoxville and the Jackass crew had their colon hydration therapy, hydrocolonoscopies. What's it called? Anyways, they had their bowels flushed out. And we heard, I'm not going to get super gross, but we heard, like, raise your hand. Who here believes that the typical North American omnivore has like 5 pounds of impacted stuff in their bowels? Right? We've been told this for decades. The lab tech, the technician, when I had it done, they were really surprised because my weight didn't change by more than a few ounces. So they weigh you in your skivvies before the process, and they weigh you after. And the difference has to do with removing whatever was impacted. Like, you're probably not going to become any more hydrated from being flushed. And there was basically no difference. And they're like, have you had this done recently? And I'm like, nope. Like, how clean is your diet? I'm like, it's really clean. I don't eat junk food. Like, that's crazy. Well, you can go to my OnlyFans for that. I'm kidding. There's just a picture of cheesecake and me with the skeleton. We'll leave this bad boy off to the side. I just want to see what happens with that. Now, what I want is just a gentle spring back. Speaking of chainmail, I saw the coolest thing with 3D printing. 3D printed chainmail sleeves. So once you take it out of the mold and start separating the links, like loosening them, it's an actual sleeve of chainmail that's one continuous 3D print. Mind blown. I did the nutrition analysis. When I was strict keto, I literally could live on cheesecake, and it was healthy for me. Anywho, we don't want this to spring back too quickly. If it springs back too quickly, it's underproofed. We want it to come back just a little bit, just like this. That's kind of perfect. I'm going to transfer these. You know what I should have done? Should have played with the knives first. Here we go. We're going to pretend Okay, so without getting too gory into the details, for the keto metabolism stuff, I was getting my blood work done every quarter, and it was perfect every time. It's weird how little supplementation you need if you have no carbs in your diet. And I'm not advocating keto. I don't think I've ever advocated for it, and I don't think I ever will, because it's a pain in the ass. I can do it not because of some magical willpower, not because I'm like some Zen monk or something. I'm just fine with it. That's the way I'm wired. Most people aren't wired to do it. And they try it and they stick with it for a month, maybe two. They don't like it, and then they relapse or whatever, and they end up having bad results. So unless you're 100% sold on it, don't try it. And I actively tell people, don't do it. Like, despite all the miraculous claims that I fully believe, like by miraculous, I mean social media, miraculous standards. So good results for some people. I don't endorse it. Okay, so we have our lame. Let's pretend this is in a fancy holder. I just want to make a couple of cuts like so. This one's a little on the weak sauce side. Okay. Now, if this doesn't work for you, I was strict under 20 grams for like 3.5 years, and I intentionally went off, and I haven't felt good about my diet since. And I'm seriously considering going back to it and staying on that for life. But before I do, I want to try a slightly longer, at least vegetarian stint, and for sure carnivore stint. I'm kind of a freak when it comes to being the opposite of a picky eater. I could eat like cold rice 3 times a day for the rest of my life, as long as I knew I was getting all my nutrition. I'd be fine with it. Doesn't matter that I make this all the time. I'd be fine with eating the same food day in, day out. Other people around here would probably literally murder me if I insisted that's what we do. Now, if your knife can't make cuts like this, which most knives can't, what I do recommend you do is just grab one end of the loaf, you get the sharpest knife you have, just like firmly hold on to one end, and you can score your loaf like this. But if you have a lame, if you have some sort of a razor blade, it works a lot better. Now this is going to go into the oven on the bottom shelf. Oven's nice and super hot. I have a kettle of boiled water over here. I'm going to fill this. Now you don't need to do this. All you need to do is get some liquid on top of the baguettes and then spray some liquid to the side of the oven, and that will give you a bit of sloshing. That will also give you a bit of steam. Okay, so this, I want to do this fairly quickly. I don't have to, but what I can do with the baguettes, I could get out a spray bottle and spritz them with a bit of water, or where are you? I can just brush some water on top. Spritzing makes it a little more uniform. Putting the water on top will give you a little bit of a crust. The steam injection is much better. Okay, so this is going into the oven. And then I lowered the temperature to 475. I set my timatron to 15 minutes. This is all super precise. I'm going to take this and soak it in By this, I mean a rolled up tea towel. And in theory, this tea towel is going to help regulate how much steam rolled up wet tea towel. This is going to go right beside the baguette. And then finally, last but not least, I can take a little bit of water, preferably from a spritzer bottle, just throw it against the side of my oven to create some steam. And even though my oven was supposedly at 500, it's down to 435 right now. So we're all going to hell. Soaking. Should you soak rice first? Yeah. I think most rice is a little too starchy to begin with, and I think rinsing it a few times is good. Like rinsing, not soaking. When you say soak, what do you mean? Like soaking it overnight, or letting it soak for like 20 minutes, which is basically the same as rinsing it 5 or 6 or 20 times. I usually rinse my rice 5 or 6 times. Which might seem a little wasteful for water, but we have infinite water up here. And it gets recycled, right? It's not like it goes into the garbage dump and it's lost forever. You're just soaking. I see what you did there. I do... I still need to do another chickpea episode. The last time I wanted to, I forgot to soak my chickpeas overnight, and then I couldn't stream the next day anyways. So possibly next week I'll do it again and do the comparison side by each of soaked chickpeas versus canned chickpeas, make 2 quick batches of hummus, and do the side by each comparison. And it's water time. Again, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of different ways to make your baguettes. This method is not the easiest that I've seen. But I don't know that the easiest method that I've seen actually works. Oh, Cradish, you, that a boy. It's Valentine's, come on. That's right. Quickly tidy up the area. I tried something really neat with eggs for making poached eggs. I know eggs. But one kitchen hack that I saw for making poached eggs took the 50-50 solution of vinegar and water. I know what a douche. Vinegar water solution, and slowly poured the egg into the mixture and let it sit for 10 minutes. Did I mention coffee maker on the blog? I think I did. I actually don't own a coffee maker, so I can't test that. I know commercial coffee makers because I used to work on them regularly. The hot water dispenser is normally around 200 Fahrenheit, like 195 to 200 Fahrenheit. That's where the thermostat is set. It's where the thermocouple trips. You can poach an egg in that water easily. easily. So anywho, after 5 or so minutes, you see the outside of the egg white start to turn a little white, starts becoming a little opaque, and then more opaque. And then you can very gently scoop that up and put that into your simmering water, and it does not fall apart. It retains its shape perfectly. Is it worth the extra time, effort, and annoyance? Because vinegar is pretty darn cheap, but is it worth the extra effort to do? Maybe. If you're doing Eggs Benny for you and the crew, yeah, I actually think it's worth doing. If it's just you and a few people, heck no. But the single biggest takeaway, actually there's 3. Use good quality, preferably ethically raised organic chickens, eggs, because they're just better. And use fresh eggs and make sure that you run them through a fine mesh strainer, because the runny part of the white is what makes your finished poached egg all icky and have like strands and stuff. So just strain it out. Then take the egg that has the more firm white with it and just slide that into some gently boiling water, and it's perfect. I play cards with mostly a crew of prison guards, corrections officers, sorry. And I'm by far the smallest of the group, by far. These are some big boys. So when I invite them over, I know it's expensive to cook for them. Well, I think the next smallest person at the table is over 300 pounds. So there's a bit of a gap between me and them. And I think the biggest of the big boys is like 360. Well, when I had them over for burgers, they were at least third-pound burgers, and everyone had at least 2. And fries and milkshake, and there were desserts after, and people were eyeing the rolls for extras. These boys have a healthy appetite. And ironically, the electrician in the crew, he works for the city. He's a big boy. He's like 6'6", and when people start getting over like 6'4", 6'5", because humans are basically built like cylinders, it's unless you're that size or used to dealing with numbers of people that size, it's kind of mind-blowing how heavy they are. Because he doesn't look like he's 300-ish pounds, but I know he is. I think he's actually like 340. But he certainly doesn't look it. And if you didn't know how tall he was, you'd say, yeah, he's like probably like 5'10" or something, probably, maybe 200 pounds. Like, no. You're off by half a foot and 100 pounds. Oh, take down some bennies, yikes. Okay, we're at 8 minutes baked. What I'm going to do is not open the oven. Now, what happens is when I do have to, when the timer goes off, I want to rotate my baguettes. I'm going to stand way back from the oven door, open it, because there's going to be a whole bunch of steam coming out, and I don't feel like getting any sort of facial. I don't care if it is Valentine's Day. No steam to the face. So I'm going to be way the heck away from the door when I open it. I'll be wearing my Joy Division oven gloves and doing it safely. And when I say play cards, of course I mean playing Magic, because we're all geeks. Most of us play 40K as well, so I don't think I've played 40K with anyone from that group. And I've known these guys for ages. What I will likely do, and I don't know if I'll record it separately and then just post a video, is do some quick, maybe just some quick edits of doing the different styles of baguettes and just doing a quick voiceover and then just having a series of videos on different ways of doing baguettes, and then my final impression. I have started posting my videos from Twitch directly to YouTube. The last 2 streams, right after the cooking portion's completed, I hit stop on the record. After the stream, I upload it to YouTube, let the AI make a thumbnail for it, and just publish it directly. So I keep the innuendo kind of toned down a little bit, just a little bit. Well, Kradish, it's funny you asked that, because off the top of my head, there's at least one. You can proof it overnight in your refrigerator for 12 to 24 hours, depending on the temperature of your refrigerator and how much yeast you're using. You can do it quickly. You can do a quick rise in 2 to 4 hours on your countertop or in your oven with the light on. Yeah, I don't even know what platforms to be using. You can use the process of autolyzing the dough by just mixing flour and water and letting the water and flour work their own magic to create the gluten instead of kneading the dough. So you can make a very wet dough and just leave it covered for a few hours and let the biochemistry happen, and the dough basically kneads itself. It creates its own gluten because the proteins in the flour eventually spread out enough because it's diluted. It's mixed in with the water just through normal, becoming a solution with the water. The protein strands relax, and then when they do reform, they reform as gluten. Same as kneading dough. So you can, all of those no-knead dough recipes, they work on that process. You have enough water in with your flour that the flour structure itself relaxes, those protein strands break apart, and then they reform stronger as gluten. And that's the self-kneading dough technique. You can do that with baguettes. You can work the heck out of it. You can make a shaggy dough and then add your salt to keep the moisture in the dough, and then add your proofed yeast onto it and mix that in. There's a lot. Yeah, and that's the thing, is a lot of the baguette recipes, the more traditional ones, it's minimal kneading. You just stir everything together until it's combined. And then you do a couple of simple folds or just a little bit of kneading, leave it alone. Do a little bit of kneading, leave it alone. Do a little bit of kneading, leave it alone. Let it rise. Shape it, maybe do a little more kneading, leave it alone. Form it, bake it, you're done. Other ones, you're kneading the heck out of it and creating all sorts of gluten. And then there's the baking temperature and the baking time and how you're introducing moisture. Some you just spray water in the area and you have a very moist environment. Other ones, like today, I have the steam being generated continuously from a water supply in the oven, plus extra water spritz to start off having steam in the oven box. And then you can spritz water on top of the baguettes or not, or you can have the baguettes all sealed with water in there. So there, and you can have combinations of all of the above. So there's easily 128 combinations right there. And speaking of oh crap, I ran out of time bread. One thing that I keep mentioning that I'm going to do and I keep forgetting to is a couple of months ago, I was out of bread and I was not mobile and I wanted some bread. So, well, there's the initial ingredients, and you can have honey or sugar or none. So there's 3 options. Like there's none, sugar, or water. You can have autolyzing or kneaded or little work. So there's another 3. So we have 9 versions right there. And then there's the how you're forming it, how you're scoring it. So those are 2 Booleans. So that's 9 times 4 is 36. There is not a factorial involved. Well, I mean, technically I could say it's 3 factorial times 3 factorial right now, but it's the same thing. It's 36. And then there's the water, there's the lid with water sprayed or brushed or none or off to the side, so that's 4. So actually, yeah, it's 4 factorial times 3 factorial times the water in the oven, sprayed on the side, with or without towel. So that's 128 right there, at least. Okay, so towel was not wet enough. I got a little cooked. Now I'm going to quickly show you what the baguettes look like. Oh my God, that's amazing. We give these a quick 180. Ten to 12 minutes. At least 11. Yeah, so mental note, I'm not going to do the damp towel again because this didn't hold on to nearly enough water and it got a little baked. That's fine. This thing was a bucket IKEA. That's got some character. What's left my bats? Oh, this is going to be interesting. Demolding these. So from here, I have to go visually. I have to check to see the temperature, the color, to see if everything is good. Now the long slit spread apart a fair bit. The ones where I scored it diagonally seems to, at a glance, look a lot better. I don't know if these might almost be. $500C. Nah, not quite. I think I need to open my patio and crank the fan. I will be right back. Okay. Our fire department is surprisingly good. Their response time really is 2 minutes. And I don't mean 2 minutes for them to get out of the fire station. I mean 2 minutes at your door. And they actually are our they are our first responders. The fire department usually arrives before ambulances do. We have a good number of fire stations. Like my parents' house at the end of the street was a fire hall. And that fire hall serves like a 1 mile radius, give or take. Our fire departments are good. Our medical system sucks, but our fire departments are pretty damn solid. I've never heard of anyone complaining about Canadian firefighters. Everything else, yeah. I tip my hat to the boys and girls in the Canadian firefighting agencies. Okay. I'm leaning towards these are done. Is this done? I'm going to give it another 5 minutes. Then I'm going to show you this one because it's kind of perfect. Like that's kind of sweet, right? It's kind of sweet. And like these lines that I made with the laminate with my razor blade, this is the money. Like this makes the money shot completely. I'm going to give this a little squeeze so you can hear the crustiness. I think the rest is good enough. Now, I'm going to show you my pan of water is kind of dangerous. This is about 2/3 of what I originally had in here. Is this too hot to handle? Okay. This is hot to handle. This loaf is the one that I scored along the middle. If you have to do this, do it, but I went in a little too deep. I couldn't resist. So I didn't get quite the beautiful scoring as I got on this loaf. And this was I just threw it in, no scoring, and I brushed water on it. And you can see the difference in the crust with the water brushed on versus the water just from the steam in the area. Because this darker brown is from the steam in the area, and this exposed part is, well, it exploding. So there's the 3 loaves. I really want to cut one of these up and put some butter on it and take a bite and freak out about how awesome it is. So I think I'll do that. And this pan is flexible. Oh, this thing is really neat. It's super flexible. My little silicone mat. Magic. Yeah, this is the way it's supposed to look, and that's hot. That's fire right there, right? Or whatever the cool kids call it. I wish I knew I'm not a cool kid. Where's my cutting board? I picked up that baguette mat on the Amazons for, I want to say $15 Canadian, so like $10 US. I'm just going to cut it to the garbage one. because I do want to take pictures of these good ones. Can I do this? When you go to cut your loaves, I find cutting them with the bottoms up seems to work better with a serrated knife. The moistures, because these are so relatively, have such a small cross section, I don't need to worry about letting this rest to come down to room temperature before I cut into it. Because normally on larger loaves, the bigger the cross section, the bigger the loaf that you're baking with, flour and whatever, the longer you should let it rest, the closer to room temperature it should be before you cut into it. Because the water needs a chance, the moisture needs a chance to spread out again. It has just the slightest sourdough tang to it. Let me get this a little. It's like food porn, right? And again, your times may vary, your mileage may vary, your times may vary. It can be, like these were 20 minutes, they can be as long as 30 in the oven. See, you will still get a couple of big air bubbles like that, but for the most part, your crumb should look like this. A couple of bigger bubbles, but not too many. So here. Wow. I take back everything I said about keto being good. Screw that. No, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. So this really, I should turn into some sort of a sandwich. But in all seriousness, if let's just pretend I were single and not trying to be as single, and I presented something like this first thing in the morning to someone, they're mine. They're mine for life, right? Thank you both for dropping by. So that's it for the stream. I'm going to be playing some games, but I'm going to end the recording now. I hope you two have a fantastic Valentine's Day. Much love. And that's all I got. I'm going to go play some games, maybe some tunes. If there aren't a whole lot of people left on, then I'm going to call it an early night. Once again, join the blog, enjoy the socials, like, share, subscribe. If you want to be a member of the studio audience, cook with or without me in my kitchen, send a self-addressed stamped envelope to this guy, care of here, Cubby. Fresh baguette. Wah-ha! Lick my subscriber button. I mean, this is pretty sweet. This is pretty damn sweet. Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna go fire up some games, maybe some tunes, and we'll see who's lurking. Be on the lookout for the YouTubes. Join the community over at the Discords. Here's my spam again. Simple ingredients, no gadgets, no fancy techniques. I mean, that fancy rolling technique, mind blown, right? Oh, wow, good for you. Good for you. That's nice. And then you can ignore that for like 10 ops, maybe more. This thing is a little bit of a gadget. If you're going to make baguettes regularly, or any sort of hoagie or torpedo or sub sandwich type breads, I do recommend getting one of these. And it's really neat because it's super flexible. Dishwasher safe, I guess microwave safe, good for like 900 Fahrenheit. So I guess you could put it in your tandoori oven if it was on medium heat. I'll tell stories about those one of these days. I have in the past. They're kind of gross. The stories themselves seem kind of gross. I know it's all foods. Anyways, I won't get into it. Not today. Be excellent to each other and stick around for all of the games.